Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'm your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. So I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. We begin with foreign policy. As you know, the President of the United States has issued a statement on Truth Social. Given the fact that Iran has submitted a plan, the President responded quickly and rejected it as, and I quote directly, totally unacceptable. No details were attached, but it is clear that we have reached an impasse with Iran. What does this mean? It means that if negotiations have faltered, and it appears that they have, the only option the president has left on the table is military action. Now, let me be clear. We have overwhelming force now assembled in the Middle East. We have the ability to crush the Iranians without any doubt. But the Iranians are going to fight back. There is no way they are going to surrender control, or what they perceive as control, of the Strait of Hormuz. There is no doubt that the Iranians want to continue to pursue a nuclear option. But most important of all for the Iranians is they will not succumb to the entreaties of the great Satan, meaning the United States of America. So where do we stand now? It appears that the president's options are limited. And by the way, you're probably asking, why am I speaking about the president's options? Because the president is the architect of American foreign policy. It is the president who will make the ultimate decision, whether to give the order to attack or not. Now, this is not something that Donald Trump thought he would have to do. He believed that he would be able to destroy the Iranian operation and that he most assuredly would emerge after a quick military action as triumphant, just like he felt he won in Venezuela. This is a president who is determined to assert American control and the triumph of Donald Trump. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what we will look for in the next 24 to 48 to 72 hours is the question of how the United States will respond. If in fact, in Donald Trump's words, totally unacceptable is the Iranian plan. So now we wait patiently to see what will happen. But it seems to me, based on what I've heard this morning, that inevitably there will be military conflict. I don't see any way around it unless the Iranians are willing to capitulate, and the Iranians are not willing to capitulate. That is clear. The second major issue is Russia, which is now alleging that Ukraine violated the ceasefire. Let's be crystal clear. Russia and Ukraine swapped accusations of breaking the so-called ceasefire. What does it mean? It means continuing conflict. There's no way around it. And the fact that Ukraine is not at the head of all of our discussions is to me an indication of the fact that really and truly we have lost sight of the struggle for freedom that the Ukrainians are now waging against the Russians. For Vladimir Putin, there is no retreat. And for Volodymyr Zelensky, there is no retreat. Neither can accept the release of this situation into the hands of the other. And so it continues. We also have the passenger ship that has been hit by the hantavirus, and we now know that it appears that that virus is limited. But we also know this has sent a shudder of fear up and down the spines of everyone. Let me remind you that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, withdrew the United States from the World Health Organization. Let me remind you that the CDC, effective though it may be, has been gutted by Donald Trump and his administration. Let me point out that we have a situation now where we are vulnerable in the event of a virus, a danger to all of us. This is a concern because it has to do with the administration's position, including the discussion about vaccines and the discouraging of America from getting vaccines. That's why we see an uptick in measles. There is no doubt that this administration's views are antithetical to health and antithetical to science. And yes, I will say it, I wish Dr. Fauci were still in place. Do you know, there are still those who want to prosecute Dr. Fauci for what happened during the coronavirus? Do you know that? All I can tell you is this. To me, Fauci is a hero, and the villain in all of this is Donald Trump. Can there be any doubt about that? There is yet another issue which we must address, something which to me is perhaps the most critical domestic issue imaginable. The Virginia Supreme Court on Friday last struck down a voter-approved Democratic congressional redistricting plan, delivering yet another major setback to the Democrats and a major victory for the Republicans. The court ruled 4-3 that the state's Democratic-led legislature violated procedural requirements when it placed the constitutional amendment on the ballot to authorize the midterm decade redistricting. You all know, because we talked about it extensively, that voters narrowly approved the amendment on April 21st. But the court's ruling renders the result of those votes void, null, gone. This is very important. Writing for the majority, Justice D. Arthur Kinsey wrote that the legislative action submitted the proposed constitutional amendment to voters, quote, in an unprecedented manner, end of quote. And then continuing the decision, this violation irreparably undermines the integrity of the resulting referendum. Well, let me tell you something. I think just the opposite. What it proved is that we've got a real problem. And it's not just in Virginia. It's across the country. Richard Hudson, chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, said this was another sign of Republicans' enormous victory heading into the midterm elections. We're on offense and we're going to win, he said. The Democrats, of course, are deeply concerned. Now, the polls show that the Democrats should, by rights, take, without any doubt, the House of Representatives. But the deck is being stacked against the Democrats, and I just want you to know that Virginia is currently represented in the U.S. House of Representatives by 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans, who were elected from districts imposed by a court after a bipartisan redistricting commission. Let me tell you, here's the key. There is no bipartisan commission that affects what's happening in Virginia. And indeed, here in California, where we had a bipartisan commission, what has happened now is that as a result of battling back against the Republicans and Donald Trump, we now have a decision made by an overwhelming majority of Californians, over 60%, to redistrict so that Democrats will take more seats in the House from California. This is something that has become a real battle. And let me say something to you. I believe this is a disaster for American democracy. And who do I blame for all of this? Why, I blame Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the one who made the decision without any question that we were going to redistrict in such a fashion that the Republicans would have a shot at winning in November. This is, to me, the most appalling abuse of gerrymandering, the most appalling abuse of power that one could ever imagine. The Republicans, it appears, may well be able to retain control of the House, not through popular decisions, but through gerrymandering, and frankly, I think it's terrible. This ruling, combined with the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, severely weakens the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We've talked about this, but I favor and have always favored the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It broadened those who could vote, not limited them. But now we have another situation that I think needs to be discussed clearly by all of us. And that is, once again, Pete Hegseth in the Department of Defense is going after Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. This time, the accusation is made that Kelly revealed secrets. Of course, the simple fact is that Hegseth has said the same thing, and no one is going after him. The partisan nature of this administration on every level should be of deep concern to every American, because what the Trump administration is doing by weaponizing the Justice Department, by pursuing redistricting in the way it is, by, frankly, abusing power, is deeply, deeply distressing. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. wrote a book in 1973 about the imperial presidency. He was speaking then of Richard Nixon. There is no doubt in my mind that what Nixon did was wrong, but let me assure you, it pales in comparison to what Donald Trump is doing. And let me assure you, this is a problem that is going to stay with us through future presidencies as well. The precedent is being set for a unitary presidency. That is to say, where all power is centered in the White House. The whole idea of balance of power, the whole idea of co-equal branches of government is being shattered by the Trump administration, and we are going to have a hard time recovering. I always remember Richard Nixon saying in the interviews with David Frost that if the president does it, it's not illegal. And of course, we know that is not true. We know that a president can break the law. What the Supreme Court did in a recent decision was to essentially wall off a president from being accused of abusing power. I have to tell you, I think this is unconscionable. This applies particularly when it comes to Iran. And I want you to understand my concern here. There is no doubt that in an emergency, say like what happened on September 11th, that the president's position is critical, that a president must have the ability to react quickly, powerfully, in a compelling fashion. But when you have a president of the United States who continually abuses that power, who does not consult with Congress, who does not seek congressional approval, this to me is unconscionable. And if the founders were here today, what would they say? I think they would be appalled. So for those of you who are Trump supporters, or who believe in strict constructionism, or those of you who believe in a unitary presidency, I want to be crystal clear. That was not the intent of the founders. And if we are going to preserve the American system, we must reform, go back, and understand that we need to have a balance of power, that we need to have co-equal branches of government. When the administration implies that if it disagrees with a Supreme Court decision, it can decide to do the opposite or resist a Supreme Court decision, that should concern every single one of us. And the same thing applies when the Speaker of the House of Representatives, even though we are at war, can utter these words: we are not at war. It is 1984. It is the denial of truth. George Orwell, if he were alive, would just marvel at how we have done this to ourselves. It is time for the American people to stand up and take back power. And that means not delimiting a president from being able to act, but rather requiring that a president consider the Supreme Court and the Congress. The midterm elections are going to be very important. And of course, we will follow in the next several hours, days, what happens in Iran. But let us be clear. The power of the presidency is an important power. But I think we have seen in this administration an abuse of power. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. Remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which, of course, is our goal. This show's been getting so much positive attention that we are so pleased to bring on the advertising support that we have. This will help us create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman, which, of course, is our goal. My deep appreciation to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. Gogo, great job. And I'll be back tomorrow with more right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.
I drive my bus in a busy city. That's why road safety is so important to me. I know that I must slow down and be extra careful when I make a wide turn. Buses need more room than cars. Everyone can help keep our roads safe. Next time you're driving, remember to give buses plenty of time and space to finish turning before driving ahead. Let's all plan to share the road safely. Learn how at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.